Do is to start your blanket stitch. I always start at a corner if possible. I come up at a corner. I keep my thumb on the thread in the direction that I'm going. I drop my needle in, come up, and gently pull it through. That forms your first stitch. You do not see the ending of this stitch. That'll happen when you get all the way around. You will do a finishing stitch. But when we start, this shows your first stitch. I keep the thread pulled in the direction that I'm going, and I put my second stitch. The length of the stitch is a personal preference. When I'm working on smaller pieces like this, I try to keep my stitch a little bit less than 1/4 of an inch. And I come up directly underneath the bottom piece of wool so that it semi-hides this thread along the bottom edge. Can you see how that's hiding there? It's not, this thread here is not sitting on top. It just falls along the bottom edge next to the cotton. So that really all you're looking at are these top stitches. So once we get around here, I'm going to stitch until I go around the corner. We did a rounded corner on the bottom of this skirt. So that makes it very easy to turn a corner. You just keep pulling that thread in the direction that you're going. Bit and pull your thread. Now when you turn, as you can see, these are a little bit closer than this was. This stitch is going to be a little bit closer than the previous to make that corner, although your stitches at the bottom stay relatively the same width. And now I come back to a straight stitch. Again, you can see where this is above, about 1/16 of an inch above the bottom. I'm going to take my stitch, come up in the seam allowance while pulling that wool down even with that seam line.
Brings it right down.
I'll pick up the next stitch into the seam line and bring that wool right back down. And you see how it falls straight in line with that seam.
It really does stretch.
The wool stretches beautifully. If you didn't leave this gap here, what would happen is when you pull that stitch down, the end of the skirt would actually be falling below your seam line. And just a personal preference, I wanted that skirt to fall along that seam line, and that's exactly what it's going to do all the way down.
How long do you leave your thread when you cut it?
When I start with a piece of thread, I do it about 36 inches, but a lot of people feel more comfortable with shorter lengths. And where we left off, we went down right to the right of your last stitch. To start again, we're going to come up just to the left of that stitch. So you went down to the right to finish it off. To begin again, you're coming just to the left of that beginning stitch. And you're going to continue on with your blanket stitch. And what it does is make a seamless stop and start. You never see where that stop and start was created.
It's a good idea. Yeah. I've been crocheting since I'm like 9.
Alright, we're getting ready to come to a point And a point, whether it's curved like this or whether it's a straight 90-degree angle, doesn't make a difference. What you're going to do is create a box. So we're coming up close to our last stitch. And I'm going to come in, and here I'm going through 2 layers. But I am going to come straight down. I turn my piece, I come into the same hole that I went into up at the top, and I'm going to create a 45-degree angle that seals that corner. I'll turn my piece again, and let me see if I can pull it down. I'll come back into that same hole again, and come up into the wool and create my box. So what I actually have is a stitch that goes across, a stitch that goes at a 45, and the stitch that comes back down at a 90 to create a corner. And that seals your corner. Stitch through the cotton base, the robe, the edge of the front of the robe, and his robe skirt. So what I want to do is lay my piece down on a hard surface. That's too many layers to try and hold together all at one time. So if I take it and I've poked the needle all the way through down to the table, I can come back up and rest assured that that's caught. Now, I have pushed, because wool is forgiving again and it allows you to stretch it, I'm pushing down, I'm coming up and just catching the edge of the robe here, of the front piece of the wool. And as I make my blanket stitch, I'm going to shove this underneath and close it off. If this piece that I'm pointing to right here is shoved under a bit more, you don't have any difficulties closing this off. If it's not, like it's shown here, you can always fix that just by shoving that wool under, and then when you pull your stitch down, it's going to seal it closed. The wool is very, very flexible and allows you to do that. Again, push the wool under, pull it, and the stability of a hard surface like this table underneath you allows you to get that done. So if you haven't pushed this piece under far enough, all is not lost. You can make up for it and get it sealed no differently than if this piece would have been stretched to that depth. And that's all there is to it. You just have the base of the tree here, and you are going to start with this to stitch first. You really need to start with the base of the tree because it tucks under the bottom branches of the tree. And this tree is going to have a cross stitch across it. You start at the base, finish up here. Then you lay your tree back down, the tree branch, and you begin stitching from here, finish here, stitch here, finish underneath here, and then finish the top piece. Always start with your bottommost piece and work your way up. That way you can lift as you go and hide your stops and starts. When we're going to make the tree stitch, we're going to begin on a section of the tree, typically at the base, but this is just for demonstration purposes. We're going to go about 1/4 of an inch over. I'm using a light color thread so that you can see how this stitch is made. Normally I would blend in a thread that's the same color. You're going to go across about 1/4 of an inch, bring your stitch down, come up right at the base of the tree trunk, and you've made a diagonal stitch. You can pull that stitch over, see that it's even, go in again, come directly across horizontally, and you've just made an even stitch. Pull it again.
I do like this thread. I do. I do it completely backwards for the most part. Alright, just have to wear the way you feel.
And I'm going to make just a couple of more stitches so that you can see how we go back. You see how your stitch is just going across at a nice even pace. It does not have to be exact, just so that you get a diagonal.
But if it's what you're comfortable doing, do it that way. I mean, I've done so much of this. That's how your comfort zone is.
See how they're a little bit different? I want to pull it a little bit more this time. Nothing in life is perfect. You don't want all of your stitches to be exactly perfect. Gives it a little bit more of a primitive look if they're a little off. There we go. To go back, pretend we went all the way up to the top. We want this to cross back over. We're going to go back down in that same hole.
That's cool.
And come up in that hole.
I'm on it.
Now we're going to go back again and go in that hole and come back up in that hole. And see how easy we make that cross? We're going to go back in that hole and come up in this hole.
Depends on what people want. You know, I'm kind of feeling my way. Birds on a sheet.
That looks pretty.
And come back.
It's called stretch lemon.
I like that milk bottle she has.
All right.
And that's all there is to it. When you want to finish again, you're going to pretend that there was a stitch there. That looks good. You're going to pull it through. Turn it over. And again, finish it off with just a little knot. And that's all there is to it. It makes a cross and holds the stem down, or the trunk of the tree, which is really too tiny to do any type of a blanket stitch on or a straight stitch that could tear the wool. So by doing this cross stitch, it keeps the tree held down, and especially if you have a color thread that is the same color as the trunk, or even a variegated thread that'll give some depth to that tree trunk and make it look as though it's bark with all the different color transferring across it.